Let's pause for a minute to talk about Anchor by Spotify. Anchor is an easy to use, one stop shop to create and host your podcast. When we started making Sleeping with the Numbers, we used other hosts first that forced us to manually upload to Apple Music, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. But with Anchor, you simply upload to a single spot and it distributes it automatically to all of these locations. But that isn't all. With Anchor, you can easily record, edit, and even add music directly from Spotify to your podcast to make it sound even better. So if you've been waiting around to create a podcast, wait no longer, because Anchor by Spotify makes it extremely easy to do. Anchor is completely free and can be used by downloading the mobile app on iOS or Android, or even right from their website, anchor.fm. Make an account today and get podcasting.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
All right, hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Sleeping with the Numbers podcast. We're recording here on Friday, so we had the delight of watching the Thursday night football game, which was just fantastic. And you know, we might talk about that later. But anyways, we're going to kick it off. Question of the day, and what we want to do is we're going to create a tier list of NFL teams going into the next season. We're going to go through all 32 teams. Just kind of touch upon, how, if we expect them to improve, get worse going into the next season, and kind of why we feel like they're in that range. So the tiers we have here, we're going S, which is, top of the line. S could probably just stand for Super Bowl contender. I feel like that is probably the best way to describe an S tier. A is also like another very good team, but maybe they're not quite there to be able to win a Super Bowl yet. B, they're winning maybe in their division. They're ending up, over 500 each season. And then C, they're right around, well, it's not possible to go completely 500 anymore, but they're right around that range. And then D, of course, is going to be a team we think is going to have way more losses than wins. And then F is just like the worst of the worst. And, probably, Detroit was probably an F tier team. But let's just walk through them. I'm just going to go through them in order how I have them here on the screen, Pat. So let's talk about the Titans. So for a while here, they were leading the entire league in wins, and that has kind of gone away. A lot of the games are a lot more close. They just had a bye week, so we'll see how they come back this week. But ever since kind of Derrick Henry went down, there was a lot of worry there. They were able to kind of keep getting the wins, but now A.J. Brown is on the IR. Julio's always hurt. So it's a weird ride with the Tennessee Titans. So Pat, talk about the strengths and weaknesses of the Titans going into next season.
I think it's hard to say because it's really determined by Derrick Henry's return. If he comes back and he's the same running back, I think that's their number one strength.
Yeah.
I'd say their wide receiver core isn't really a strength because we saw A.J. Brown at the beginning of the year. He wasn't super productive. Ryan Tannehill's older, so I don't think he's going to be a strength for the long term. I think your main strength is you have that number one elite running back. And you also have a pretty good defense, too. So I'd say for me, they have good potential in terms of, we have an offensive powerhouse. We're going to be able to be competitive games and maintain possession and kind of waste time and not blow you out, but we're going to make every game close. So I think that they have a good conservative offense if everything works out with Derrick Henry.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Henry is going to be the make or break here. These running backs, they don't last long in the league. And, all it takes is a couple injuries in their career. Kind of takes a downturn. I don't expect that to be the case with Henry in at least the near future. But it is a worry. And then, everyone else is getting hurt as well. A.J. Brown, even though he didn't have a hot start, he's still a very key part of this team. And then Julio Jones, you go out and trade for him, expecting him to come in to, possibly even be the number one wide receiver for your team. And he's just doing what he's always done, which is go in and out of games. And you really cannot rely on that. So for me personally, I think they are very close to being able to be a Super Bowl contender. It depends on the health. Maybe they can get a few more key pieces, but Pat, I feel like I'm comfortable putting them in the A or B type tier. Do you have a preference there?
I think if it's my preference, I'm going to say B, because I think Julio Jones is going to be even more relevant next year. I think Ryan Tannehill is going to start falling off the face of the earth. And I just don't think outside of Derrick Henry, they have the offensive weapons to really maintain dominance. They're just lucky they're in a bad division.
Exactly. Yeah. That was going to be my next point. I think, if we look at their division right now, they're still at the top of it at 8-4, Colts at 7-6, but then you have both the Texans and Jaguars sitting at 2-10. So, and strangely enough, only the Texans mathematically eliminated in the AFC so far. Jaguars still mathematically have a chance at playoffs, which is amazing. But yeah, super easy division, and they're always going to finish in at least the top two, for the foreseeable future. So I'm fine with putting them in the B tier. Next team here, we got the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins are currently third in their division and what ends up being, a pretty competitive division. All of these AFC divisions are. Patriots at the top, of course, Bills, and that's kind of where the problem lies, right? Patriots and Bills are always probably going to be top two in their division. It's going to be very difficult for the Dolphins to make their mark on this division. Luckily, they'll get 2 wins against the Jets every year. But as far as that, I'm not the biggest Tua fan. I think Gaskin has looked pretty good. Their Waddle looks amazing. So I think if Waddle can continue to grow, they can definitely make their mark, but I do not see them, competing for the Super Bowl anytime soon. And playoffs each year is going to be difficult for them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think they're sort of the opposite of Tennessee in terms of, the talent is about to walk out the door. If anything, they have a lot of young talent that's going to be there for a while, because I don't know if you mentioned Mike Gesicki, but he's also pretty solid too as tight end. So for me, I think, like you said, they're in a bad division in terms of, can they break through anytime soon? They're going to probably have to push for the wild card for the majority of the time. And I don't think Tua is as terrible of a quarterback. I think that they would probably risk it if they went and drafted another one, because then you have no idea what you're getting. At least you know what you're getting with Tua. He's at least okay. So I agree. I think that they're probably below Tennessee in terms of, probability for next year for winning.
Agreed. I think, we kind of said C is kind of that 500 range, and I think that's where they belong. Next team here, the Jets. F. So, all right, I'm gonna be devil's advocate here because I pretty much agree on the F. It's going to be super difficult for them moving forward. They're not going to be contending at all. But what I can say about them is they do seem to be building a team. Zach Wilson, he got a win, and he played with why can't I think of his name? Who's their wide receiver?
Elijah Moore.
Elijah Moore has a lot of these rookie wide receivers are breaking out early, and that's not something you see normally. But Elijah Moore has looked good. And if that connection between Moore and Wilson can continue, they have at least 4 years together in my mind, maybe more. So I think that can continue to grow. I don't think their defense is the worst. I even like Michael Carter. He's shown flashes of things he can do. They just they're their own worst enemy. They get in their own way pretty much every single game. And somehow they have 3 wins on the season. But again, like the Dolphins, they are in a competitive division. And by competitive, I mean the Patriots and the Bills are always going to be the top 2 for the next at least few years. So anything positive to say about them, Pat, or can I just throw them in the F?
I like what you said about Elijah Moore. He's good. And I don't think Zach Wilson's horrible. I think that people see the amount of interceptions that are panicking, but also I feel bad for him. They also have Vera Tucker on the line, so he looks like he's going to be a pretty solid piece to build around. So they're not going to be horrible, but it's the same thing with the Dolphins. There's no way they're going to top the Bills or the Patriots anytime in the near future.
So, all right. I'm going to put my vote at a D, because I think, like I said, they have some good pieces that they can build around, and they're always going to have a high draft pick. So I think going for the years to come, they can definitely build around it. Are you okay with that?
Sure.
Okay. Oh, starting to get interesting. Getting into the AFC North, Cincinnati Bengals looking pretty good. They got wiped a little bit by the Chargers here last week, but 7-5. Joe Mixon is still a workhorse running back, and they use him as such. Jamar Chase has looked good. He has been a little watered down the past few games, but T. Higgins has taken over there. So when you have two very young wide receivers paired with a very young quarterback, it really looks like their outlook is only going up. So, my vote would be a B team. I would kind of put them in there, kind of similar to the Titans. We'll get to the Steelers, but I see them on a downward trend, and if that's happening, someone needs to take their spot in the division, and I think it could be the Bengals.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I think they've kind of balanced themselves out because, Jamar Chase was super hot at the beginning of the year. And like you said, T. Higgins has stepped up. And I think Joe Mixon is sort of filling that gap and becoming the workhorse that they thought they've had in him this whole entire time. Like, he's always been good, but I think this year he's really, solidified that he's a pretty good running back. So I agree with you. I think the Bengals are a pretty good team.
Cool. We'll pop them in the B tier here. Going just right into another AFC North team, the Browns. Pat, they just seem like a completely average team, and that is not at the fault of a lot of their pieces. I think there is talent on this team on both sides of the ball. You have Nick Chubb, one of the best pure runners in the NFL right now. Kareem Hunt, when he's healthy, is a fantastic backup. They just need to figure out, A, their wide receivers, and B, their quarterback. I don't know if they've taken the 5th-year option on Baker already. I can't even remember if when they drafted him, but I wouldn't be surprised if they move on.
I wouldn't be either. I think for them, it would really depend on, at this point in time, do you accept defeat and just restart, or do you stick with what you have? Because I think we've seen Baker can be competent if he has a good receiver corps, and he doesn't right now. I mean, Jarvis Landry really hasn't done anything. Peoples-Jones is very hit or miss. And I mean, outside of that, like, Austin Hooper's okay, but he's not what he was in Atlanta. So I think defensively they're fine. I think that they'll be competitive, but I'm not really sure if Baker's the real problem. I think that when they have a good year with Chubb and Hunt both healthy, I think that they have a solid setup. They're very similar to the Titans, but obviously Tannehill's playing a little better than Baker.
So the Browns did exercise the 5th-year option for Baker, so he will be here in 2022, and he's getting a very nice paycheck of $18.9 million. So, if you're fine spending that money for mediocrity, go ahead and do it. I think Juju said it best, the Browns is the Browns. So, to me, they're a C-tier team.
Yeah, sure. C's good.
Jaguars. Okay, so I think it's easy to put them in the F here, and I personally think that's where my vote would go until they get rid of Urban Meyer. The same can be said, like we talked about the Jets. They're always going to have a high draft pick. They got the number 1 overall pick with Trevor Lawrence to build around. James Robinson has looked good. Even their wide receivers, they kind of fluctuate here and there, but I think it's not a terrible receiving core. Now, their defense, on the other hand, is where I would say needs the most work. But, they're not going to be anywhere near making playoffs for quite a bit. And so, like I said, I think I vote F here. I think they're worse than the Jets.
Yeah, I think that what people, they want to put the blame on Urban Meyer, which is fine. But I think ownership, in reality, people don't want to talk smack on the Jaguars because, Jerry Jones is the evil owner. But I don't think Khan has really done much since he's purchased the Jaguars. And he also, and people don't watch soccer in America, I know that, but he also ruined Fulham FC, which is who he originally owned. So to me, I'm not really sure, what his deal is. I just feel like he's the type of guy who's just trying to make a buck, and he doesn't really care about the team. We've had that experience with Bob. Oh my God, I'm blanking on his name. The owner of the Pirates.
Oh boy, he just sold Seven Springs and Hidden Valley and all that.
Bob Nutting. But
okay.
It's a very similar story. Like when you have these guys who have a lot of money and they have a good product. Like first off, the Jaguars don't need pools in their stadiums. That's stupid. That's a waste of money. You could have, I don't know, hired a head coach who didn't like to hook up with 18-year-olds at the bar or whatever he was doing. So to me, I think it's a mess. And it, like you said, it won't change until the culture changes. I don't think it's just urban. I think it's the whole entire atmosphere. Like it's the Browns had to die and become the good Browns. And I think that's what's going to have to happen in Jacksonville.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. But, you know, my argument for the polls is they need something to do. They're not going to watch a game.
That's very true. I mean, what is the average age of a citizen in Jacksonville, Florida? Is it over 70? Because my concern is that they can't get into the pool.
Median age, Jacksonville, Florida.
That's probably rude. It's actually probably a fun city. I have no idea.
Median age rose to 38.2.
That's when back problems start to come into play. So I think the pools might be therapeutic.
F tier for the Jags. Detroit, Pat, I don't think we have a lot to say here.
It's hard to not put them in the Super Bowl category.
S for
Jared Goff's girlfriend, and F for the Lions.
That works for me. Vikings, again, they have all of the pieces. They have a fantastic running game with Cook and Madison. They have maybe an even better receiving game with Jefferson and Thielen. Conklin has even looked good, but it's hard to say now. But the Vikings defense has not looked good until last night when they played the Steelers. And I don't know if it's just because they played the Steelers that happened. They also lost to Detroit. So I really don't know what to make of the Vikings. It feels like everything's there. They just haven't been able to do anything with it. And to me, that just kind of screams, you know, C tier, kind of the middle of the pack right now. They're 6-7, which, like we said, they're going to be around that 500 mark. Any arguments against that?
No, not really at all. I think that you hit the nail on the head.
All right, Tampa Bay. Is there any argument against S tier?
Not at this time. I think that, you know, we've seen that they have their flaws, but they also showed flaws last year, and that clearly didn't matter. I think when you have a good team, and especially a team like that, where you have a bunch of guys who've been hurt all year, like their wide receiver core has been pretty beat up. So I think people aren't really thinking about that. And I think that they're assuming because it's Tom Brady, they're going to be a perfect team every year. And that's not how that works, but he's good enough to make them through. So I think they're probably the most deserving team of being in the S as of right now.
Yeah.
Even though the Patriots, do they have a better record? Now I got to double check myself before I start talking.
Yeah, I think they're at the same. Patriots at 9-4, Bucks at 9-3. So Patriots have one more game played.
Yeah, I think in terms of, if you gave me like one team to pick to put my money on, I'm still probably picking Tampa just because they've been consistent.
Right. And I think another thing about Tampa is they have both the tangibles with very skillful players, Evans, Godwin, Gronk, Brady. Fournette is just taking off this year. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Devin White is an animal. Arguably, probably the better Devin of that draft class compared to Devin Bush. But like I said, they have the tangibles like those teams, but they also have the intangibles, which is, I don't think any other team can say that because they don't have Tom Brady. Tom Brady finds a way to get a win in pretty much any situation where you're like, oh, they're not winning this game. He gets it done. You give Tom Brady the ball down a score with a minute left, I would go make a bet right at that moment, in-game bet, that they go and win. And how many times has that happened? It feels like it happens, you know, at least a few times every season. But like you said, I don't think there's a team more deserving than Tampa at the moment for the S tier.
And they're a great example of what Jacksonville should follow, because they used to be the Jacksonville football for how many years? They also live in Florida, and the median age is over 75. But they've brought back and made this a winning culture in, 3 years, if that?
Does their stadium have a pool too?
I don't know, but we can't complain about it because they actually win. That's the main thing. If Jacksonville was winning, the pool would be a great idea.
Raymond James Stadium. They got a sick pirate ship. I don't see a pool, though. Pirate ship's cool.
I like the little town that they always show in the background as if I care about what the stadium really looks like.
This is Tampa. San Francisco, they're a team I have a tough time with. We talked about them at the beginning of the season. A lot of people seem to put a lot of stock in this team, and then just nothing happens. They made it to the Super Bowl that 1 year, lost, and then nothing. So I don't know if it's I'm actually pretty proud. I can't think of his name right now. Colin Kaepernick curse or what happened there, but they just cannot get it done. Even though Debo looks fantastic, Kittle has been pretty cold for the season, but you can't deny what he did last week as the tight end one. Who the hell are we talking? Jimmy G and Trey Lance, that quarterback situation moving forward. Who knows what happens? We kind of felt that, Jimmy might have got the bench by now, but they keep somehow winning games. They're 6-6 at the moment, so they're not going to put in Trey Lance unless Jimmy's hurt or losing games, and he's neither at the moment. So I don't really know what the future holds for them, Pat. A lot of people, like I said, really like them, but I'm not one of those people.
Yeah, I feel like this team could very easily turn into the Buffalo Bills. And the reason I say that is because Buffalo doesn't have a good running back core. And I don't think San Francisco does either. I think you have a lot of guys who are okay, but I remember when the Bills brought in Devin Singletary, and everyone's like, oh, he played so great at Florida State. And Zach Moss, he's going to be a stud. He was benched, 2 weeks ago for just not being good. So I think that when Trey Lance does come through, that situation is going to be resolved because you have the mobile quarterback. You don't necessarily need a running back, and you have a pretty decent wide receiver core. Now, in that division, it goes back to the same thing we said about the Dolphins. Can they jump that, line and become the number one team in the division? I don't really think so. I think, to me, they're the worst in the NFC West. And I'm basing that based off the fact that I'm not impressed. Like, Debo's really good. That's really it. So for me, I don't see San Francisco making it happen next year. I think in a few years they'll be competitive, but I don't see them being in that Super Bowl category unless something major changes.
And it feels like their team could just drastically change in the next few years. Trey Lance should take the helm, but their running backs as a core, it's like a curse. They just get injured. Whoever's the starter, they stay the starter for like half a quarter, and then they're injured again, and then it's next man up. So it's just a carousel of running backs there in San Francisco. And then
maybe Frank Gore will come back.
Who?
Frank Gore.
Yeah, bring it back. I feel like he is actually already playing just under a different name. It's just no one knows. But, they feel like the Browns to me. I think that's kind of a fair comparison at the moment, even though the Browns have a much better run game. But they're just kind of that like middle tier guy. So I feel like they're another C tier team.
Yeah.
Atlanta Falcons. Initial thought goes to a D. I feel like they're comparable to the Jets. They got nothing. They drafted Kyle Pitts, and he has not panned out. Pat Freiermuth has been the rookie tight end to have this season. And why that is, I really don't know. It feels like Matt Ryan just can't sling it anymore. He lost his buddy Julio, and now he's just kind of in the dirt. And then, does Cordero Patterson stay again? If he does, maybe they hover around that C range. But in my mind, they are an aging team that is going to need a full rebuild. And Kyle Pitts was just the start of that. Who knows if Calvin Ridley comes back, but Matt Ryan should be on his way out here in the next year or two. So to me, they feel like a D tier team.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you hit the nail on the head. you can say all you want that Kyle Pitts is an amazing athlete, but until he gets a better system to help him, he's not going to be able to do anything.
Next, we have the Ravens. Again, I feel like it's going to be them always kind of at the top of the AFC North at the moment. We talked about, well, we touched upon how the Steelers are kind of on their way out, it feels like, in terms of being a top two team in this division. It might be the Ravens and the Bengals for the next few years, but even at the top of the division, we have seen their problems. Lamar has turnover problems. It seems like every time he throws the ball, it's either for 40 yards or an interception. And when he runs the ball, it's not going in the end zone anymore. He hasn't scored a rushing touchdown since week 2. So it's difficult to rely on that. It's difficult to rely on these rush heavy quarterbacks when that's all they can do. Now, we've seen flashes with Andrews, with Hollywood. I really like Rashad Bateman. He showed some good flashes. Again, another rookie wide receiver that looks great. And I expect to improve. But as for the team as a whole, that's where I'm not so sure. I feel like it's fair to put them in the B tier with Cincinnati, just because they are always going to make the playoffs, at least in my mind, just because they'll be at the top of that division and probably first in the division.
Yeah, and I think what we've at least seen with them is, they brought in Villanueva, and they have an okay offensive line, but I think that's going to make the difference down the road, because I think Lamar, like you said, is not a great thrower, so he needs good protection. I just don't know if he's really had that this year. So I think if they can improve their offensive line through the draft and free agency, I think that they'll be B+. But if they don't, and they allow for Lamar to not really succeed, then it's going to be a tough time. And they need to get J.K. Dobbins back, or somebody. I mean, they need to get somebody to balance that offense out, because they were always really good when they had Ray Rice and Ray Lewis, or not Ray Lewis. Who am I thinking of? Jamal Lewis. All these guys. Was that?
There was a Rice.
Yeah, Ray Rice. There was Ray Rice and Jamal Lewis, and then I said Ray Lewis.
Too many.
But she was really good as well. The point is that Baltimore's always been really, really good when they've had a really good running back, and that was pre-Lamar Jackson. But I think that you need that in the NFL. I think that the Buccaneers have shown that Leonard Fournette's fairly capable. Who else? The Browns are only in existence because of Nick Chubb. The Titans are only in existence because of Derrick Henry. Right. So I think that's proving that the running back is important again.
And it takes that pressure off of the quarterback. And like you said, Lamar is a running quarterback, probably the rushing quarterback in the league, but he can't do it all himself. You don't want him getting whacked every single play. It's not good for the team. It's not good for him, especially in the long term. I mean, look what happened to Cam Newton. So it's a high fall from grace if that happens. I don't expect it to. Ravens should continue to stay competitive going forward. The Bears, however, I don't think they stay competitive going forward. Looking at their division, Packers. Actually, that's a fantastic question. If Rodgers is out, which it sounds like he is, are the Packers still the number one team in that division, or do somehow the Vikings jump up? I think their team as a whole, as far as GM coaching, is definitely better than all of the others. But you cannot deny that Rodgers is the glue that kind of holds that together. When Jordan Love came in and played, it was a shit show, to kind of say the least. So I don't know what happens with them going forward. We're not really talking about them, but the Bears, I'm not a huge Justin Fields fan. David Montgomery's pretty good. They just need to get him the work. But they don't use their number one wide receiver in Allen Robinson. He doesn't get the ball. It doesn't make any sense. I'm pretty sure they franchise tagged him, so they're paying him a lot of money. And he's just not getting the ball. So I feel like he's gone next year. Yeah, they franchise tagged him. They're paying him $17.9 million this year. I don't think they tag him again, but if he's gone, not that you were using him anyways, what other weapons does Chicago have?
Darnell Mooney.
Yeah, that's fair. But I don't know. I need to look at his splits between Fields and Dalton, because in my mind it feels like Dalton has been the one getting him the work.
I think Dalton's been getting everybody the work. I think that you're right. The Bears should be in this tier with the Jets and the Falcons. I mean, who cares about them? I think if Aaron Rodgers leaves the NFC North, I don't think it's going to be one team's going to stand out. I think this will be an AFC South situation where everybody's just kind of okay. And I mean, the Titans fortunately have a good team. Like, they're not bad, but like in any other division in the AFC, I don't know if the Titans would be number one. If that makes sense. Like, I feel like they're only number one in that division because their division sucks. So like, I feel like it's going to be the Vikings. Still could be the Packers. I mean, who knows? Maybe the Lions have a resurgence next year, because we'll get to them. Or actually, we already talked about that. What am I talking about? But DeAndre Swift is pretty good. Yeah. And we've seen that they're at least competitive. That's how the Browns were 3 years ago. So who knows? But not the Bears.
Yeah, not the Bears there. So we'll put them in the D tier here. Going on to the Cowboys. Cowboys, again, they're a good team, and it feels like they've definitely gotten better this year. With Micah Parsons added to the defense, Diggs added to the defense. They've looked good and that's exactly where they needed to improve, and they did that. Now, like every team, I guess, but it all comes down to health. Does Dak stay healthy? Does Zeke stay healthy? And at this moment, does it matter if Zeke stays healthy? Because Pollard's really, really good. I was asked a question, I believe it was last week, maybe it was on Thanksgiving. But there was talk about, does Zeke stay in Dallas next year, or does Tony Pollard just take over? They can't get rid of Zeke. His contract is way too pricey for anyone else to take on. They're going to be paying him this money. They're not going to get rid of him. They still have 5 years left on his contract. They do have a potential out in 2023, but even then, it adds about $12 million to their dead cap. And for those who don't know, a dead cap is basically money paid to players that are no longer on your team. So that is not going to happen. So Zeke's here to stay. Now, does Pollard stay? That is the other question, because he could go somewhere else and be a starting running back, I think. He has one more year on his contract here, his rookie contract. So, I mean, we're talking about the future of these teams. Do you think they extend Pollard and keep kind of this two-headed monster going?
I would. I think we've seen it's a recipe for success with a lot of teams. Cleveland's the number one team in my mind because Chubb and Hunt are a crazy duo, but Baltimore's shown that you can have a committee of running backs and be successful. Kind of even the Raiders have sort of shown that a little bit. Kenyon Drake really hasn't been as productive as he needs to be, but he was super productive on the next team I'm going to mention, which is Arizona, which if Chase Edmonds hadn't gotten hurt, that'd be another great one to reference. So if I was Dallas, I would, but you never know what they're going to do. You can always find a Tony Pollard type of guy in the draft if you really need to.
And I think Dallas is a very, like I said, talented team. I just don't see them as an S tier. So I think it's fair to put them in the A.
Yeah.
Houston, they're an F tier. Do you want to talk about Houston?
Not really.
All right, we won't. Indianapolis Colts, they are, in that same shitty division that the Titans are in, and they're always going to be the top two. We don't think the Texans or the Jags, two F-tier teams that we have, are going to make any moves in the near future. So they have an opportunity. Maybe it keeps flipping between the Titans and the Colts. We've seen Jonathan Taylor take over. The two best running backs in the league are in this division. So that's kind of interesting there. But in terms of a more well-rounded team, I kind of have to say it's the Colts. Would you agree?
I agree with that. I think that we've seen outside of Jonathan Taylor, they don't really have anybody who really stands out, but that's not a bad thing. And if it's me, I'm going to put them in the same bracket as the Titans. I think they're the same team in reality, not like down to the wire, but for the most part, it's a very similar makeup.
Yeah, I think so too. If we compare it, which running back would you rather have, Jonathan Taylor or Derrick Henry? Flip a coin, whoever's the healthiest, right? And then when you go to the receivers, would you rather have Michael Pittman or AJ Brown? And that I don't know. It feels easy to say AJ Brown, but it really hasn't been that case. They're two wide receiver 2 range players, but I don't know who's better. So given that they are basically the same team as the Titans, kind of sounds like that puts them in the B tier. Next, we're going to go through the LA team. So starting with the Rams, Pat, this is difficult in my mind. Coming into the season, they were supposed to be the team in the NFC West. Now it's the Cardinals, which, I couldn't be more happy about. That's awesome. But the Rams, they go out, they get Stafford. Now they have OBJ. They lost Robert Woods. They were supposed to have Cam Akers, who was supposed to be the guy. He had a rough injury, one that's tough for running backs to come back from. But so next year, I don't know what to say about them. It feels like, in my mind, they should be an A tier, but I almost want to push them down to B tier because it feels like they're underperforming compared to what they could be.
I fully agree with that. I think what we've seen is the Rams are not afraid to make splashy trades and picks, but it hasn't necessarily panned out yet. So until they can contribute in a way that justifies them spending that money, I think you're right. I think that they're an A team on paper, but a B team in reality.
Well, we'll make them an A team on the digitally because that's where we're doing this. So that's the same as paper, right? So, all right, next LA team, the Chargers. I love the Chargers, Pat. I know you do too. You were really amping them up along with the Cardinals preseason, and it's awesome to kind of see them both work out. So Chargers here, 7-5, Chiefs back on top of that division somehow. They just have not looked good at all at 8-4. It really feels like this is the Chargers division to own for the next few years. It's easy to say it's going to be the Chiefs, but I think the Chargers are really just getting started with what they got. They got a second-year Justin Herbert who looks great. He's only going to get better. Keenan Allen looks fantastic. Mike Williams had a monster first 6 weeks or something of the season. Austin Eckler looks great. Their defense looks pretty good. They have a little bit of a tough time stopping the run and all that, but I think that's really the only smudge on their record. But other than that, it's hard to argue that the Chargers don't have a top 5 offense in the league.
Agreed, and I think that we've seen that their talent outside of really Keenan Allen isn't that old. They should be around for a while. So I think I agree with you. I think that they're going to be definitely competitors in the AFC West. I like their roster a little bit better than the Chiefs. I think Mahomes is definitely the better quarterback, but outside of that, Tyreek Hill is good, but he's just too hit or miss. And I haven't been super impressed with CEH or the Chiefs defense. So I could see the Chargers being a B+ team next year. They've definitely had their moments where they've fallen apart and they let the Steelers come back on them. But I think for the most part, they have the opportunity next year to build and take themselves to that elite level.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and put them in the B here. But like you said, I think that it's a B+. They're really moving up. Raiders, on the other hand, I think they're moving down. They were leading this division for a bit, and then they have all the off-field issues. What do you even say about them? It's a mess there in Las Vegas, which it usually is. But I don't like Derek Carr. I don't think he's the quarterback of the future there for the Raiders. Josh Jacobs seems to have come back to life, but I don't think he's utilized in the right way. Waller is obviously the shining star. He's just been injured this season. Renfro has looked good. They lost Henry Ruggs, who was supposed to be their wide receiver for the future. Um, their defense looked good at the beginning of the season. I remember giving a lot of praise to their defensive line, but that's kind of stopped. So to me, they're middle of the mall, C tier type of team.
Yeah, I don't think Derek Carr is going to be there next year. And like you said, all their talent is very hit or miss right now. When you ask people who's your best wide receiver, it's Hunter Renfrow for sure. But Darren Waller, he's just supposed to be your elite pass catching option. He hasn't really done anything this year. And when John Gruden was still the coach, he always talked about Brian Edwards, what has he done in recent weeks? So you got Max Crosby on defense. You got a pretty good secondary, but that's not enough to take you to the playoffs. So I think you're right in putting them in that middle division.
It's weird, comparing them to the rest of the C tier. I think they're worse than all of them. So I half want to vote for them to be in the D tier, but I just think their division's competitive enough that they still would have the chance to be at the top of it, or at least, like we said, for the C tier, a pretty much a 500 level team. Washington football team. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say about them at all. They're somehow second in the NFC East. That, again, it's just a bad division. Cowboys are always going to be at the top of this division for the next few years. I probably agree that Washington is second out of all of them, but that really doesn't mean much. Their defense was supposed to be a top 3 defense with Chase Young, and they just were awful at the beginning of the season, even through the first half of the season. They're just now kind of turning it around. I think Antonio Gibson is fantastic. J.D. McKissick has been a good backup, and somehow he becomes a starter at times. Terry McLaurin is, again, another very talented wide receiver, but it might be Heineke that's kind of dragging them down, and he kind of feels like he's a one-season rental, right? Because he wasn't supposed to be the starter. It was supposed to be Fitzpatrick. And obviously he got hurt early on in the season, and it's been Heineke for here on out. But if they draft a quarterback, I think they have a lot of those pieces there. So it seems like they're kind of a C-tier team.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that they're more in shape compared to the Jets and the Falcons and the Bears, but I don't see them changing anytime soon. I think that they need to really evaluate themselves. I put them in the same category as the Dolphins, where you have a couple good pieces, but it's going to take a lot of work to balance everything out.
Kansas City, next team up here. They feel kind of like the Rams, where they have all the talent in the world. They were just in the Super Bowl in the recent years, and they lost. Now they're trying to rebuild. They've looked bad this season, but they're still somehow on top of their division. I think it's easy to put them in the A tier going forward, but I think it's more sure on the short term time range than a longer term time range. It feels like they're nearing the peak, and they might have already gone over that hump.
Agreed. I think that the Cowboys and Rams have a better setup for the future. I think Kansas City could very easily turn it around. I think, like you said, they're 8-4. And when we say that they look bad, they look better than a lot of teams who we think look good. Like when we say, the Dolphins are horrible, but they're still worse than the Chiefs, who look bad for their standards. So I think you're right to put them in the same tier as the Rams. It's a very similar situation.
I feel like we might be split on this next team, but the New Orleans Saints, I wasn't a fan of them going into the season. Their quarterback situation is a mess. Their wide receiver situation is a mess. Kamara is the offense when he is healthy, but that's the key thing, when he is healthy. Lattimore is supposed to be the key piece of this defense, and everyone's all scared about him. But when you look at the statistics, it's really not that scary for an offense to face the Saints defense. They still get it done. I am not a fan of the Saints anytime in the near future. And so my argument, Pat, is they feel like a D team to me. They just seem to be going south quickly.
And contrary to your beliefs, I agree with you. I don't like their offense at all. I actually traded for Alvin Kamara in one of my leagues, and it looked great at first, and now it's been miserable. I think that their wide receiver core is okay, but they have nobody special. Their best player hasn't played all year, and I don't like their quarterback situation at all. So for me, I think that they're riding on their defense alone, and to me, that's not enough to survive in that division.
I think we got another D-tier team here with the New York Giants. They're kind of close to the F tier, though. Giants last in the division for the NFC East. They are 4-8. They're not going to be in playoffs anytime soon. I like Daniel Jones, but I don't see him staying here. He's not their quarterback for the future that they thought he was. Saquon Barkley, again, absolutely love the guy. He just kind of seems to be like a glass house, which is, again, another shame. I'm curious what happens to him mostly. Kadarius Toney is another good rookie wide receiver. I think he has a bright future in the league. Galladay looks horrendous. Who else? Sterling Shepard there. He's been hurt on and off. Their defense has actually been pretty good. Middle of the pack here defensively, but their offense is just not able to get a lot done here. So I'm pushing D tier for them.
I agree with that. I think that if Saquon would have panned out the way he needed to, I think you could have argued for them to be a C, but they're just falling apart, and they need a change for sure.
And I think I can make the exact same argument for the Eagles. Their running back, also from Penn State, Miles Sanders, has been injured for most of this season. Jalen Hurts is not the quarterback of the future. I think Minshew kind of proved that this past week. Not saying that Minshew is the future, but it kind of proves that another quarterback can step in there and do pretty well. They've been wanting rid of Hurts ever since they drafted him, which is insanely confusing, but he could go somewhere else and start, hopefully, but it won't be for the Eagles. Wide receivers, Devonta Smith, he was drafted the earliest out of these other rookie wide receivers, right? He was the first one off the board, correct?
He was number 5, I believe, or number 6.
Yeah, so, and I think he's, in terms of first-round rookie wide receivers, he's probably been the most disappointing, and I don't think it's due to lack of talent. It's a similar situation. He doesn't have a quarterback that throws the ball.
So, geez, he was number 10 overall. What the hell was I thinking?
But still the first wide receiver, right?
No, Jamar Chase. That's what I was thinking of.
Shit. Okay.
We can do this whole thing.
Ah, damn it.
No, you don't have to if you don't want to.
Devonta Smith, definitely a disappointment in terms of where he was drafted. And again, I think that's more on the quarterback than anything. So D tier for the Eagles?
Sure.
All right, Pat, it's time.
Well, before you get into that, just for your reference. So Jamar Chase was number 1. Was Devontae Smith the second wide receiver drafted? I forgot this as well.
I think so.
Who else went to Alabama?
Elijah Moore?
No. Oh, did he?
No. Oh, or did he go to Ole Miss?
He went to Ole Miss. Ole Miss. It was Jalen Waddle. And what's funny is that Miami got that pick from Philly, and I kind of feel like they shouldn't have done that.
Interesting, yeah. Well, all it would have done was harm Waddle's season.
Yeah, that's true. All right, sorry. Let's get it over with.
That is interesting. All right, Steelers. F. Man. I'll argue for D. Okay. I think Ben is gone, and I think our biggest issue is our defense and our offense will even be good enough to keep us in the middle of the pack for the NFL. And the problem with that is that doesn't allow us to get high draft picks. So we're never going to get, I bet we never get like a top 10 draft pick, just because we'll just be on the edge of those ranges. We'll be able to stay in games. We'll pull wins out of our ass. And that's a problem when you're trying to rebuild a team. So if we're going to stay competitive, I really do think that either A, we need to trade up and take a quarterback in, top 5
like
if
Kenny
we can.
Pickett?
Exactly. So if we can do that, I don't expect him to come in and save the day like people thought Trevor Lawrence was going to do, but it's a platform to build on. And while he's, getting ready to play and everything, maybe we get a veteran. We sign a veteran, let him play for a bit, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, just because, again, we have a lot of the pieces. We have arguably a top 5 running back in Najee. Deontay is a fantastic wide receiver 1. Chase needs to get his shit together, and maybe he can stay on the team. Juju, I think, is gone. Our offensive line was not as bad as people expected it to be, except for yesterday. I thought Ben was going to die that game, but Ben's out. Our defense arguably is a top 3 defense in this league. TJ Watt should be defensive player of the year. Fitzpatrick's fantastic. Hayden's fantastic, although it sounds like he might be gone as well. So TBD. But either way, we have a lot of talent on this team. We just need someone who isn't Ben. So I think, at least in the near future, 2022, 2023, I feel like we're going to be a D+ type team.
See, I'll argue for a C. I was being a dick earlier when I said an F. I really do think that Aaron Rodgers is going to be the future of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm just kidding. But you never know what's going to happen. I could see exactly what you said happening. Derek Carr is not going to be with the Raiders. Baker is going to be with the Browns for 1 more year, so he's not really an option. But is Sam Darnold going to stay in Carolina? Who knows? Right. There's so many options out there. It's not Mason Rudolph. No, I don't know about Dwayne. I haven't really seen Dwayne Haskins play enough to really have an opinion. But I think the Steelers have a very young core, and even if they lose Minka, that's one player in the secondary that you lost, and he's pretty good. Don't get me wrong, but your defensive line is still pretty solid. You still have Cam Hayward. Stephon Tuitt should be back. TJ Watt, he's not on the line, but he rushes a lot. Alex Highsmith looks like he was a good draft pick. I think the Steelers are a low C, depending on who the quarterback is, and depending on what they do in the draft. I think that line-wise, you're right. They're not terrible, but they definitely need time. And right now is not the time. You should not have rebuilt your line when you were basically going over the peak of the Super Bowl era. That was dumb. They should have kept Villanueva. They should have went out and gotten more free agent help and not Trey Turner, because he's a chode. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Yeah, fair enough.
Who spells Trey with an I? Chodes. That's who does it.
Chodes look like eyes. Yeah. So given the definitions that we gave at the beginning of this, C, we're saying that's about that 500 level team. So that's where we'll put them, because that's kind of where I expect them to be. We'll still somehow win games against very good teams and lose against very bad teams. That's just the Steeler way, as they call it. Next team here, we got the Denver Broncos. Quick thing here that I guess, we're a sports show, NFL based, that we got to bring up. So sadly, Demaryius Thomas passed away. I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, at age 33. I did not see what happened. I'm sure they're keeping that close. They said he had
seizures and he collapsed. So,
either way, way too young for something like that to happen. As you know, he was a very talented player for the Broncos, and once he left, he didn't get much more of an opportunity. But sadly, his life was cut short. So Denver Broncos, again, they need a quarterback. The Cortland Sutton should be a good wide receiver. Jerry Jeudy should be a good wide receiver. Tim Patrick should be a good wide receiver.
He is a good wide receiver.
Tim Patrick is a good wide receiver who gets touchdowns every single game somehow. Noah Fant is supposed to be a good tight end, but he's apparently also a glass house. Javonte Williams is the future. He's fantastic. So they're another team I see on the upward swing here. I think they're comparable to maybe Miami, where they have a lot of good pieces. And personally, I'm just not a fan of the quarterback, but I don't know. I feel like they should have drafted a quarterback this past draft. I don't know why they didn't. But they almost have to this upcoming season.
Agreed. I think comparing them to Miami is very fair. And who knows? I mean, their history of drafting quarterbacks hasn't been so great. So for me, I would have tried the free agent route as well and just hope that Teddy was enough to hold over. And he hasn't been horrible. So I think it was a good try. They weren't going to win the Super Bowl this year anyways. So I think they made the right choice in waiting, building a team capable of supporting a young quarterback when that person does show up.
And, again, based on the definitions we gave earlier, they feel like a middle type team. Their division, they'll likely always be in the bottom half here in the near future, with the Chiefs and the Chargers always being ahead of them. But, they can beat up on the Raiders every now and then. Green Bay. This one is interesting. So, again, I want to make sure we focus on not the right now, but next year and moving forward. Because personally, right now, I think they're in that A tier range. But if you lose Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams at the same time, you're going to get bumped down. Now, we briefly touched upon it when we were talking about the Bears. They'll probably stay at the top of their division, or at least near it. But some rebuilding is absolutely going to need done. And I think given that moves them down to like a B- C+ type team for me.
I agree. I think that we've found out with them that Aaron Rodgers is the glue, like you said earlier. And I think when he leaves, that's really going to be an issue. I kind of put them in the same tier as the Steelers, where they'll figure it out and they won't be horrible next year, but it's really going to be hard to bounce back immediately. So I think they're basically the Steelers of the NFC, and in terms of they're not going to fall apart, but they're not going to be able to recover.
Yeah, it's a curse of being somewhat good. So yeah, we'll bump in that C tier. If we could add, a little in between tier, I think a B- C+ is probably more reasonable, because like we said, C is probably like that 500 range. I think they're at least a couple wins above that, but it's just such a fall if you lose both Rodgers and Adams. Carolina, next team here. I'm so tempted to put them in F. I don't like anything they're doing, Pat. It just does not feel good. Darnold looked good at the beginning of the season, but like we talked about, by week 4 or 5 or whatever it was, after they played Dallas, they were exposed. They are not a very good team. McCaffrey is fantastic fantasy wise, but does it really matter in terms of real football? It doesn't seem to. Who's going to be the quarterback next year? Who knows? Cam is not a starting quarterback anymore. DJ Moore has been hit or miss most of the season. I know this because sadly I have him on a couple teams, but their defense is really the best part of this team, and their offense hasn't been able to do much. So they feel like a D tier team to me.
Agreed. I think that they have a lot to pick up on, and I don't think that they're going to survive with just Christian McCaffrey, because unlike the Titans and unlike the Colts, they don't really have a good defense or a really good anybody else to support that role.
So this is going to be a close one. So I think I would love to say that the Cardinals are a S tier type team. They are 10-2, and we got to remember they were winning games without DeAndre Hopkins, without Kyler Murray, and they were still getting it done. Their defense from game one was shut down. They've just been very good on both sides of the ball. And when you have a team that can bring it together and win games without two of your star players and arguably, top three at their respective positions, that is another team that also has those intangibles that we talked about with Tampa Bay. So any argument to putting them in the S tier with Tampa?
Not at all.
And just to kind of touch on this, because we are talking about the future of these teams, I think in the longer term, the Cardinals have a brighter future. They have a younger team. And when Brady moved to the Buccaneers, everyone's like, well, how long is he going to be there? And that's still a question. He says he wants to play till he's 50, and honestly, he probably could, but time catches up with everyone, and I just don't see the Buccaneers holding together as long as the Cardinals will. Next team here, this one is also pretty difficult. The Buffalo Bills, Pat, you and I were both pretty hot on them at the beginning of the season. Both of us had them going to the Super Bowl, which is still likely, but the Patriots are just so damn good. And we haven't talked about them yet, but we will. But the Patriots are incredible, and the coaching ability of Bill Belichick is scary, and he does it year after year. But sitting at 7-5, Pat, I want to put them in the A tier, but that 7-5 record is a problem. That kind of makes me lean towards a B.
Yeah, I think that their defense has really exposed how bad they really are. Because at the beginning of the year, we were talking about how the Bills have a great rush defense, and what has been the biggest issue with the Bills is that everybody runs on them. So it doesn't make sense. I would put them in the B just for the fact that something's missing and we don't know what it is.
Yeah. Could it be the run game that you talked about with the Ravens?
Say that one more time.
Could it be the lack of a pure running back, kind of like the Ravens?
Yeah, I think so. I think that Zach Moss was supposed to come in and be that guy, but he hasn't been. And I think that puts a lot of pressure on Josh Allen to be successful. And also the 2 through 5 wide receivers for the Bills, last year, that was an incredible gift. The fact that Josh Allen could throw to Isaiah McKenzie or Gabe Davis or any of these people, and it was fine. What has Cole Beasley done all year? Emmanuel Sanders fell off the face of the earth, and those other guys don't do anything anymore. It's all to Diggs and to Dawson Knox, and when you're in that situation, you're basically how the Chiefs are. All you have to do is take out Diggs and Knox, and then there's no offense.
Yeah, it is a worry, and I can speak as a Zach Moss owner. It's extremely frustrating to have him on the team because you can't play him. It doesn't work out. He'll either get benched for Matt Breida or something, or if you're like, okay, well, I need him this week because all my other running backs are on bye week or something like that. He's a healthy scratch because McDermott hates him or something. I don't know what to kind of expect going forward with them, but I agree. I think they need I'm thinking about it. Tony Pollard would be a fantastic ad for them.
Ooh.
That could be fun. Maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't, but they are lacking something, and that's really limiting them from being in the upper echelon of these teams. Seattle Seahawks here, not very good. 4-8 right now, and I'm kind of tempted to put the blame on Russell Wilson completely. I know they got a win. I know he's been injured, but he does not look like the Russell Wilson of old. They have arguably one of the best wide receiver cores with DK and Lockett. Both extremely talented, different skill sets, but one is just a massive human being and the other is a speedster who can just beat your defense. But they also don't have a running game. Who was it supposed to be? Chris Carson was supposed to be the guy, has a neck injury that keeps him out, and then he ends up having season-ending neck surgery. And then next guy up was supposed to be Rashard Penny, and he's also a glass house, gets hurt on the first snap he takes. And then Alex Collins was there for a bit, played decent. But, overall, they are not the Seattle Seahawks, of 5 years ago or whatever it was when they were the team to beat in the NFC. They seem to be going pretty downwards, and they feel like a C- D+ type team to me. What way do you lean on that?
I'd probably throw them in that D category for sure. I don't see it panning out outside of, like you said, the receiver core is pretty good, but I don't blame Russell for their struggles. I think that you had a team that was based off of really solid defense, and that's not there anymore. So they're kind of in the same boat that the Steelers are in, is that you have to revamp the identity, and the Steelers tried to do that offensively, and the Seahawks haven't tried to really do anything. So until that changes, they're going to struggle.
Then our last team, but definitely not the least, sadly, New England Patriots, still staying in it, still being dominant. They are 9-4. I personally did not expect this from them. I'm pretty sure I bet the under on wins for them, but Bill Belichick does it again. Mac Jones is in the perfect position for him, and he has a bright future there. Now they don't have. It's interesting because you talk about the talent around Mac Jones, and there aren't really a ton of big names. They're just guys that can get it done. They just grind it out. They're able to score. Their defense is able to keep them in low scoring games, and it's impressive to see, especially when you can win a game against the Buffalo Bills at Buffalo and only throw 3 times. So, I think they're an A tier, but they are very close to an S tier, Pat.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that in a sense, they're based off of a really consistent system, like you said, and talent-wise, they have some of the pieces, but they don't really have anybody who's outstanding, and that's actually really surprising to me, because the other teams in this A tier, it's, hey, we have a lot of good talent, but we just haven't really put it together just yet. Patriots are kind of the opposite. Hey, we have a really good system, but any of these guys could go anywhere else and probably not start. So it's very interesting to see how that works, but I think the Patriots, of these 4 teams in the A category, so Dallas, Rams, Chiefs, Patriots, I think the Patriots have the best potential to go up to the S quicker, just because of the fact that their system works.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because we just said it. They don't have a lot of big name key players, and I think they have a lot of money to spend, Pat. I think they could go out in free agency again, much like they did at the beginning of free agency this past year, and just spend up. So let me see how much money they got here. So going into 2022, they will have oh wow, okay, it's not as much as I thought. They will have the 18th most salary cap remaining, but again, of course, they can move around some players. There's a lot of little sneaky things you can do with turning salary into a roster bonus. Then it can be prorated out the length of the contract instead of one big hit on the cap. Also, the cap is going up next year, so it'll be interesting what they do. But I, for one, am somehow still being impressed by Bill Belichick year in and year out and what he's able to do with the team that he's given. That's going to do it for this episode. Hopefully this gives you a better understanding of what to look for in these teams moving forward. Hopefully we put these in tiers that people will agree with. I'm sure there's going to be some angry fans out there, but make a rebuttal.
Fuck
Give
'em.
us your fuck them. I'll post this up on Twitter as well, just to get some more hate to see what happens there. But anyways, that'll do it for this episode. Thanks for taking a listen. Want to remind you, Monkey Knife Fight still going on. Use our link. First deposit for new users. Get it match instantly up to $100, and just do some prop betting. You got NFL, you got hockey. We got a fantastic UFC fight this weekend that you can do some prop bets on. Monkey Knife Fight makes it super easy. Pick a player, pick a stat, over, under, place your wager, win some money. Monkey Knife.
And don't forget about BarkBox as well. If you click our link, you get a free month. These are great opportunities to get good dog treats and toys for your dog. Or if you're into furries, it's for yourself. If you like to try shit like that, we don't judge you. So get one for yourself, get one for your dog, get one of each so you can try the experience. And the good thing is that it's all natural jerky made in the United States. So if you do eat it, you won't get sick. So that's my pitch for BarkBox.